So lovely to be here with everyone and also to be introducing our special spiritual guest, who is Martin Rowe. Martin is the director of the Culture and Animals Foundation. He's also the founder of Lantern Books. If you are a vegan or an animal rights person and you look on your bookshelf, you probably see lots of books from Lantern Books. They've done so many incredible titles over the years, and some of those actually come from Martin Rowe. You can read all about him in his bio, which is listed. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm very glad to see everyone. And yes, I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad you are. It's always wonderful to talk to you. William and I joke sometimes that we think you're the smartest person that we know. And it's always uplifting in that way of, oh, we are being lifted up to bigger thinking every time we talk to you. So I'm sure it'll be like that today. So I was very interested just in what you wrote back to me when I invited you to do this, because you were basically saying, are you sure you want me? But some of the things that you said in asking that were really fascinating. So you started out by saying that you're interested in religion. I know you have an academic background in religions. You said, I'm steeped in the Anglican tradition, but I am agnostic. And I'd like to hear about both of those things, but first about being steeped. As someone who's kind of here and there and all over the place, I don't really understand steeped. So tell me about it.
Well, thank you for asking those questions. So on my mother's side, at least, we come from a long line of teachers and dissenters, Protestant dissenters, actually going all the way back to the 16th century at the very outset of the Protestant Reformation. But the most recent group of people who've been in my family have been Anglican priests. My great-grandfather was an Anglican priest. His two children were schoolmasters, but they also officiated in Anglican ceremonies. So it wasn't surprising that I was raised in the Anglican faith, and I spent a good 7 or 8 years in the choir at my various schools. So the liturgy is very familiar to me. I did English literature and language at universities, a university in which the King James Bible and the various iterations of that through the language of John Milton and others is profoundly influential upon the English language as a whole and scholarship there. And then I did a religious studies master's degree at NYU. So steeped means that it is part and parcel of my conceptions of ritual activity, as well as the language of faith and the very simplicity or explicitness of the Anglican liturgy is very moving to me. So that is that's the steepedness of it.
So for those of us in the States, difference between Anglicanism and Episcopalianism?
Well, I don't think in any particularly important ways. It's still the Church of England. So, but there are, I think Anglicanism would have to be differentiated in the United States since it's not England. So
okay.
But it's the same church.
But to experience it, that's where we would go here.
Yeah. I mean, if you wanted to have a full immersion experience, you should watch both the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II and the coronation of Charles III. If you want the complete high church bells and whistles of high Anglicanism, in which I grew up, that is what you would go to. So you don't have to go to church. You can just go to YouTube and watch it. And that may well be all that you ever need to see or hear ever again. Undiluted Anglicanism.
Well, I'm happy to report that I attended both. So you're agnostic, and lots of people say that, but I don't think other people really know what any individual who says that means. So what does it mean to you?
Well, I have problems with the creed from the very first words. I believe in God. the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was, etc., etc. I believe in God are the four most uninteresting aspects, I think, about faith. The eyes relationship, the specificities of belief, and the prepositional form before the ineffable. For me, I find all of those questionable, and in the questions, I find the most interesting and imaginatively compelling dimensions of the believing person. I'm very, very interested in the people who believe. And I have many friends, very many friends over many decades who are practicing religious. They are monks and they are nuns. They live their daily life through the rounds of the expression of faith. And they have, I'm fascinated by what they are called upon to do and how they choose to express their calling. So I'm very interested in people who believe, but I just do not find the words "I believe in God" resonate with me.
And you also implied in your little paragraph to me that you were interested in these powerful elements of what faith requires. So in your view, what does faith require?
Well, in my reading of the various scriptures of faith and the stories of faith, I am struck that all ecumenism aside and the kind of sense of faith as a consolation or faith as a place of comfort and sanctuary and rest, the stories that resonate with me and the people who resonate for me run as far as they possibly can away from faith. So God, when God calls upon the person of faith, or the person who will be the leader of that faith, it is at an inconvenient moment. They feel inadequate to it. It often involves explicit submission. It is all-consuming, and it turns their life upside down. They have physical manifestations of the experience of suffering of faith. They go blind. They can't speak. They run to the ends of the earth to escape the mission that they're sent upon. And they are obligated to do sometimes terrible things. And this is where I become more existential and appreciate the work of Kierkegaard, who was very much about the extraordinary amorality, the supra, beyond the notions of ordinary morality that the person of faith is called upon to be. So for me, it is the tremendum, that experience of the divine, is challenging to all our conceptions of the notion of faith as a place that is peaceful and restful. It is turbulent and destructive. It changes the entire trajectory of your life and makes you a different person. In Saul's case, a very different person, a completely different person. So that for me feels a more, again, I think it's probably because I'm a writer and I'm interested in the imagination. It's more interesting to me to look at that dimension of faith, the all-consuming, turbulent, difficult, highly charged nature of it, than what I consider to be the rather bland ideas of faith that I think institutional religion would probably prefer us to welcome and appreciate.
So what caused you to go for graduate study? And this is interesting to me because I have a bachelor's degree in comparative religions. And I remember when I was in school, every now and then thinking, I have the only major that some people don't even believe exists. You could be majoring in history or chemistry, and some people could say, oh, that sounds awful. I wouldn't want to do that. But nobody would say, oh, history, that's nothing. And yet religion and God and all that, we can't measure that in scientific terms. And yet you were drawn to do your graduate study in this field. Why?
Well, it was religious studies, so it was the fact and practice and the doctrinal and philosophical underpinnings of those religions that was being taught. And I just don't think you can understand civilizations without understanding the formulations by which they identify themselves and their relationship with the divine. So religious studies feels formative to me in understanding a whole range of disciplines. So it wasn't a seminary, it wasn't asking us to change our or acquire our faith, but it was very much along those lines. And I knew that if I did a study of philosophy or I would talk only about God. So I decided to do a religious studies degree so I could talk about philosophy.
Love it. And yet you said that none of this interest in people of faith and religions as formative for culture had much bearing on your animal rights and vegan sentiments. That you said those are driven by humanism and moral philosophy. So just as you defined agnosticism, define humanism.
Well, first of all, my earbuds are running out of battery space, so I'm going to return to this. I hope you can still hear me.
Hear you beautifully.
Okay, very good. So, well, I thought when I was thinking about how to respond to this question. So I'm very interested. So this might explain it. So I'm very interested in Leibniz's question that he asked many, many centuries ago. Why is there something rather than nothing? That for me is a very interesting question. His answer was the monad, the necessary monad. All nature is made up of component parts, and the thing that holds all those parts together is the part that has no precursor. So all contingency is based on this fundamental principle, which he called God. And even as I articulate that answer, it feels thuddingly uninteresting to me. It feels over literal. It feels a shortcut. It's a shortcut to dwelling in the question of the absolute improbability to the vanishing point of possibility that there is a universe, that it exists rather than nothing existing. There was probably plenty of non-existence before existence, and there will be plenty of non-existence after existence. But the fact of existence is so extraordinary that it cannot be contained in a theism or even in an atheism, because the presupposition of an atheism suggests that the meaning there is a God to which you do not subscribe, but agnosticism, which dwells in the lack of knowledge, agnosis, is for me the most appropriate place to be in, because it stops the question from being answered by the failure to imagine that the question could possibly not have an answer. So that, does that help? I don't know. That's I think where I think my philosophical interest exceeds the doctrinal or dogmatic or even the precepts or the philosophical thinking that might, for instance, exist. Now, there are plenty of religious scriptures that have asked questions as a doctrine of faith. So in the book of Job, God asks Job, were you there when I created Leviathan? Which is an unanswerable question. Of course he wasn't there, but he's saying there is a time before time where I was present. You have no idea. You have no concept of being able to think about that. In the Tao Te Ching, the plurality of the universe is so great that there is no number larger than the 10,000 things. And in one of the great Vedic scriptures, there is a hymn to the creation, which ends with a series of questions, in which I think the final thing is, and then there was a time before that, and perhaps maybe there wasn't. And so at the very outset of the structure of some of the great scriptures that have animated human beings, there have been questions when they've come to we have no idea. We have no concept of it. So dwelling in the question is better than the answer.
And yet you seem to have found an answer to certain questions, such as Should we have respect and value for other than human beings? Should we be
Mhm.
consuming them, exploiting them? No. So where does that come from?
Well, that came from a recognition that I had absolutely no reason to continue to eat animals. There was no good justification that I could see. It was unnecessary. It was thoughtless. It lacked, it was quite literally the very least I could do. I was concerned about the environment, but I hadn't really formulated ideas of animal rights. I hadn't formulated ideas of a healthy lifestyle. I hadn't looked at the issues surrounding environmental problems associated specifically with factory farming. I didn't read a book, watch a video. I knew vegetarians, and I thought, I will try it. And as long as I remain healthy, I will continue. And there were various sort of moments that pushed me towards veganism. But it has never been something that I felt it was for me the starting point. It was never the ending point. So
you are now the director of the Culture and Animals Foundation. Where does human culture and animal rights, where do they intersect?
So the Culture and Animals Foundation was founded by Tom and Nancy Reagan back in 1985. Tom, who literally wrote the book on animal rights called The Case for Animal Rights, which is 40 years old this year. And I want to acknowledge, and I know he's there on the call, Zippera and Jim Harris, who I met many years ago back at the International Compassionate Living Festivals in Raleigh, North Carolina, that Tom and Nancy put on in the 90s all the way up until 2007. And it's there I met many scholars and philosophers and artists and creative folks who showed me how animal rights and creativity and philosophy merge together. I mean, I think we all know that animals are profoundly important for the child's imagination. Maybe they are the things that stirred the imagination, and that animals have been foundational in art. They are the images that we see on the caves. So it is for whatever reason we may ascribe, it was hunting patterns, it was whatever totemic animals. It was the animals that caught our eye and our imagination, and it is their presence in our lives that, for me, not only stirs the imagination, but makes me fear that their absence and their continuing absence, and not just the loss of charismatic megafauna, but the loss of the animal, means that the fundamental thing that makes us human, which is the capacity for us to act upon our imagination, will die, and we will cease to be human. So it is intrinsic to the experience of being human that we should create art in order to understand the animal within us, but also the animals without us. So.
And how do you see the role that all these religions that you have studied play? It seems, I think, to most of us here that they have profoundly let down other than human beings. Why, and can we fix it?
Yeah, so that's a very long question, but I think I would talk a little bit about what I think our obligation is as animal advocates. Even though I have published many, many books on the various sutras and doctrinal books and chapters on why fill in the blank religion should care about animals, why the practitioners of that particular religion should care about animals. And most people would go to the various proscriptions about not harming animals and the prescriptions for living a good life, which means being kind to others, etc. Again, I don't think that's the most interesting area. It is the fact that in, say, the Hebrew scriptures, throughout the Hebrew scriptures, there are two things that are going on. The first one is what goes into your mouth is as important as what comes out of it. So how one expresses the word of God is also tied deeply to food. But for me, more interesting than that is that When God needs to speak to human beings, he does so through the least likely of sources, by which I mean the least in the hierarchy of beings who have ascribed themselves as the intermediaries between God and the divine. In other words, men. He speaks through either a bush, or he speaks through a donkey, or he speaks in the Christian scriptures, particularly through women. And actually, the Balaam and the donkey is female as well. So in that case, both. And that tells me that within that particular formulation of God speaking to human beings, it is of those connected to the natural cycles of the world within that rather primitive idea, who are called upon to hold the powerful to account for their actions. And just very quickly, I'll tell us that the Balaam and the donkey, I'm sure you know about from the book of Leviticus, the book of Numbers, but there's a little segment where Balaam and the donkey has seen the angel of the Lord, and Balaam, the great prophet, has not. So there's an inversion. The donkey is the prophet and the Balaam is the ass. They fall to the ground before the angel of the Lord, and the following statement is made. And God opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said, "Why are you hitting me?" Because Balaam had hit her 3 times. And Balaam said, "Because you made a fool out of me. If I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now." And the donkey said, "But am I not your donkey, whom you have ridden all the days of your life? Was I in the habit of treating you this way?" And Balaam said, "No." And then the story continues on. And for me, that summarizes all you need to know about what the Hebrew scriptures talks about our relationship with animals. First of all, it doesn't say God opened the mouth of the donkey and God spoke through the mouth of the donkey. It said God opened the mouth of the donkey. So we don't know whether it's God speaking or the donkey speaking, but it doesn't make any difference. The simple question that is asked is why? Why? Balaam has many opportunities to justify his human supremacy, all that he has done as the vice ruler of God's dominion. All he is as a prophet, as somebody who is in touch with the divine world. But he doesn't say that. He says what is all honesty in what should be all of our responses, which is we are terrified of being made fools of. We are terrified of losing our sense of supremacy to the animals, that everything we have constructed is based on this notion of ourselves as different and better. And the fear that might be wrong makes us feel foolish, and we lash out. And then she doesn't say too right. She doesn't say, "What an idiot you are." She doesn't do that. She asks him another question, which is essentially saying, "But I've been with you all along. You and I, we have a relationship with one another. Am I not your donkey, whom you have ridden all the days of your life?" And then she asks the golden rule. Was I in the habit of treating you this way? So the golden rule extends right there in the Hebrew scriptures from probably a very, very old folktale that was inserted into this chapter, which says we extend the golden rule to humans, to animals, to the other than human world. And Balaam has no answer for that, because there is no answer for that. We have been with you from the beginning. Have I ever treated you this way? And Balaam says no.
Ah.
For me, what else? I mean, what else is there to know?
Not much, Martin. Thank you. That was exquisite, extraordinary. I'm so sorry that our time has run out. Martin will be at the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago in August, along with a whole lot of us and a whole lot of other animal people. So do check that out. And otherwise, look into the Culture and Animals Foundation